Welcome to the Schuby Show, where sports, movies, TV shows, technology, history, and more come to life. Now, please be seated and get ready for some more never-ending nonsense with yours truly, Schuby.
Hello and welcome to the Schuby Show with yours truly, Carson Schubert. And today I am joined by Tom Schreier. And Tom is the founder or co-founder of what is now known as Zone Coverage, formerly known as Cold Omaha. You can follow him on Twitter at tschreier3. That's SCHRIEI. Now I got it wrong, Tom. Now I got it wrong.
No, it's TSCHREIER3. I think there's one other, Jason Schreier, who I don't know. I reached out once to see if we were related or something. He's a Kotaku guy. If you have any video game, nuts who listen to the show. But yeah, that's actually a running joke on the Wolves programming with Zach Bennett. He does, is supposed to do a daily show on the Wolves, and then has Wolves Wired with Tim Pakeless. But he, whenever I'm in there, he tries to spell my name, and it's an adventure for him and just about everyone else out there.
Yeah, I got it the first time, and then of course when we're on air, I missed it. So.
Yeah, I can validate that. You're not lying to your listeners there.
So, Tom, how you doing today? It's a beautiful day where I'm at. You're only about 4 hours north of me, so it's beautiful 70-degree weather here in northwest Iowa. How about for you guys?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I'm looking. Where is it again? You're from? It's like Rocky Point or something like that.
Rock Rapids, Iowa. It's
Rock Rapids.
Yep, it's about 30 miles east of Sioux Falls. So,
I think I drove past it once. I was I used to do USHL hockey coverage, and I only did it because I used to read Hockey's Future a little bit and saw they needed a writer.
Oh, okay.
And they liked me because I knew USHL because two guys I know from high school actually played. One played for Green Bay and Des Moines. And actually, now that I think about it, I know another guy played in Des Moines, and then one guy played in Waterloo. So because of them, I knew a little bit about USHL, and probably for 3 years or so, I can't remember exactly. Hockey's Future would just send me to random places, and I'd go interview prospects, and it's kind of fun. Now I've seen a few of them. Gustav Olofsson, for example, with the Wild, I interviewed him. I know he played for one of the Iowa teams. Jacob Slavin, I think, or Slavin. I'm trying to think, a handful of those guys. But because it was a weird thing I knew about, they would bring me on there. But I think I drove through there, and I like Iowa outside of, I think it's Cedar. Which one? Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
Is that the one where they take a picture of you? It's the most annoying thing. I was driving back from St. Louis. I actually had to stop in Waterloo, Iowa, which is the only time I've been in Waterloo. But I was driving back from St. Louis, and I obviously kind of had a little bit of a lead foot because I'd driven down with friends, but drove back by myself. And they took a picture, and then I get a picture in the mail like 3 months later. And it's like, well, it's like, you got me. Like, obviously, you can't deny that that's my car. Like, you can obviously look up the license plate and stuff. But I was like, what? Like, what the hell? Like, I'm just trying to go on my way. You can see there's no one else on the road. Like, it's not like I'm swerving in and out of traffic. I probably had cruise control on like 85. It's just like, I want to go home, man.
Yeah.
It's a 10-hour drive from St. Louis. So,
yeah.
But other than that, I'm cool. Sioux City was interesting. It's a pretty small city, as I'm sure you know, but they were very gracious, really nice people down there.
Yeah, Sioux City's about 60 miles south of where I live. And then Sam Ekstrom, who works for you, he went to college at Dordt, I believe, in Sioux Center, and that's 30 miles south of Rock Rapids. So he kind of is a little bit more familiar with this area as well. So
so you know him?
I know of Sam a little bit, just through Twitter and listening to the Vikings Locked On podcast. So.
Oh, gotcha.
I just know of him basically.
Yeah, no, I'm glad he's actually gaining traction. I've known him for a while. He was I was writing for Bleacher Report, so this was a while back, and covering the Twins. I think the first year I covered the Twins, which might have been 2011. I was still in college between my junior and senior year, and I met him while he was writing for K-Fan, and through that, like, we stayed in touch, and kind of right around the time we were getting Cold Omaha zone coverage going, I had a friend who he grew up in Colorado and went to school in California to me, but he ended up at Creighton Med School. And Sam and I actually drove out to Creighton and nearly won. We were in the semifinal round. We were up 8-2 in a beer pong tournament. And a kid from, you can't make this stuff up, this was like $300 on the line. And I, at this point in my life, I'd still like $300, but then I really wanted $300. And, and a kid from St. John's and another person actually beat us.
Oh my!
Yeah, so you can ask, if you have him on the show, or if you meet him or talk to him on Twitter or whatever the hell you communicate with him, you can ask to verify this. But yeah, Sam and I were very close to winning. It's called the J, which is in Omaha, and kind of a big time. They're the Blue Jays, I think, Creighton. So yeah, I was. We were really close to glory. I don't know. Maybe Sam would tell the story a little different than me, but from what I remember, that's how that went down.
Yeah, I actually have a high school classmate that is going to Creighton down there, so I know a little bit about them and followed them a little bit through their short trip through the NCAA tournament this year.
Right, exactly. It's a fun deal. I mean, you drive in and it's a big time stadium. I mean, it's probably as big as the X or, Target Center and stuff. And it's kind of cool. It's like right there when you drive in, and it's a cool little town. There's probably some stories I shouldn't share on the podcast, but there were some wild times we had down in Creighton, and he's no longer there. He actually lives in Cincinnati now, but he really liked it. The 4 years, I believe, he lived over there.
Yeah, the audience can use their imagination of the wild times you had down there.
Yeah, I actually talked to Phil Irvin, who I think works for the Wild now. He used to be one of those Fox Sports writers, and really, really awesome guy. He's from Omaha, and I told him about Whiskey Tango, one of the bars we went to, and he goes, "I would never set foot in there." I was like, "Oh, I was told it was perfectly fine." But there's some, it's a small town, but it's definitely a fun time.
Yeah, it's always fun I've gone to the College World Series, I think once, maybe twice, and it was a lot of fun to go to that and kind of just be in that Omaha atmosphere. It's not Minneapolis big, but it's kind of got that little bit of a city feel to it, but it's not too big. Yeah,
no, it's I actually covered I was doing USHL stuff still, and the USHL, there's an Omaha and a Lincoln team, and so they played in the afternoon in just slushy ice, but in that stadium, like an outdoor, event. And then the UNO, so Nebraska, Omaha, and North Dakota played. And people aren't going to want to hear this because I know it's Gopher territory and Gopher games are fun and all that. But the North Dakota fans, even though I was honest with them and told them I was from Minnesota, they were very nice, and they were well represented in the city. I mean, I think UNO's program is just kind of getting going a little bit, but yeah, North Dakota, there was a lot of green in that city that night, which was pretty ridiculous.
To the dismay of Arif Hassan, who I actually,
right.
Well, actually, I have been. Grief. I don't know if you knew this, but I actually have been the intern on Norse Code the last not the recent episodes, but a couple episodes, and I'm going to be actually doing some hosting for them, and so I'm kind of getting pretty well familiarized with Cold Omaha and now zone coverage, and that leads us into our next topic, Tom. So you went from Cold Omaha, and you kind of made up that name from your trip down to Omaha, right?
Yep, exactly.
And then now your zone coverage. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we actually say it's zone coverage. Home of Cold Omaha. The idea behind Cold Omaha was at the time the ticket was on the air, I was actually kind of on my last leg. I had gone through the Bleacher Report cycle. I was in the middle. It took me about a year to write my big, whatever you want to call it, on Deadspin about my time at Bleacher Report. And I was in the middle of that and writing for Yahoo and making about $10 an article, which was not enough. I just moved out of home. I was kind of like, need to make rent and all this. And I just got lucky, and Michael Knight, who's used to be a KDWB DJ actually, and it's been all around the country, and kind of was revamping his career as a sports host. And I thought it was a joke. Like when he reached out to me on Twitter, he was like, hey, do you want to come on the show? And I thought it was some guy, just like some radio guy who was trying to make fun of a blogger, basically. And so I kind of communicated back and forth just to like kind of feel it out. And he was genuine in his request. And for me, it was sweet. I grew up, I love KQ. I listened to 93X a little bit, but I really, really love KQ, and to be in the same building as, over time now, I've obviously, I do some work for Bob Sanser. I used to be his producer until he decided he wanted to take over that. But I do his show Monday and Wednesdays, and that's in Tom Bernard's like personal studio. So I've met him, and Zepp before, unfortunately, he got laid off. And a lot of those people, and it was a cool experience. And basically, Mike was like, we could create something like Grantland. And again, this is the sports media world we live in, where literally the ticket is now the vibe. And Grantland has closed its doors and now is the Ringer, which I like, but our guys, we talk about it a lot. And, I mean, everyone has their own opinions, but I don't think it's quite the caliber writing that Grantland had. And, but yeah, I was like, we could do something like that locally and then have this extra media arm where, in addition to doing podcasts, we could have a presence on the radio. Unfortunately, things kind of fell through with the ticket, but Cold Omaha kind of, for lack of a better word, survived it. And we wanted to preserve this idea that it would still be like a Grantland eventually. I talked to other media members about it because, in today's world, we're all like connected. We all sit in the press box together. Occasionally we'll, grab drinks after the game or whatever. But, people are kind of curious about what we are. And, as much as we don't, Brian Phillips or, Jonathan Abrams writing for us, we want that kind of, eventually like Cold Omaha specifically to have that like Grantland feel, and then zone coverage, not to compare it to ESPN, but like, zone coverage is the overarching thing, that, we're going to try to get into more curated content and, some highlights. So again, like a Buxton catch the other night when I was covering, he had this sweet diving catch where he bailed out Santiago, and, something like that, you clip it out and put it on the internet. And, until the visions realize it's kind of hard to explain to people. And to be honest with you, I mean, we work with the marketing team, and the marketing team said, you need an approachable name, right? Cold Omaha is just like Grantland is kind of a fun name and is very specific in terms of Grantland. It would be Grantland Rice and, that quality writing that he kind of kicked off. And with Cold Omaha, it's the old Humphrey line where without professional sports, Minnesota would be a Cold Omaha. But we kind of had to move away from something like that. That's great for like a Grantland type site, but for zone coverage, if we really want to expand out and especially be associated with 93X KQ and something like that, we probably need a better name. So, it's one of those things, like they kind of approached me and they're like, yeah, I know you came up with this name. And I said, I get it. I mean, at the end of the day, like I've always been realistic that it's a business and there's, a gray area between Bleacher Report, which is very business oriented, right? And then, a nonprofit or whatever, which we're not. Our goal is to make money, and I think that's, every guy gets that, or everyone on our team gets that, and most of us are, I believe almost all of us are on board with it because we realize, look, if it doesn't make money, we really like what we're doing now, and we won't be doing it for too long if it's, if we're losing money or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to do what's best for you if you really want to survive in the sports world. That is for sure. As I am one of those people that's trying to rise up and become bigger name. Eventually, my career goal is to be a play-by-play broadcaster for either Fox or probably not ESPN after the recent news.
Right.
But NBC, CBS, something like that. Hopefully, be one of the lead guys, as I've done play-by-play since about 2013 for my high school. I've got a job at a radio station near in Sioux Center, actually, where, as I said, Sam went to college at Dordt, and I've been really doing some good things. I started a podcast that is not this one, the other podcast, the You Don't Know Jack Show. I started that in August of last year, and I just started this one this year. Just getting my name out there, talking sports, because I just love to talk about sports. I just love sports in general. So I understand you gotta do what's best for you, because otherwise you're probably not gonna end up where you want to end up.
Yeah, no, it's hard with ESPN because you look at like Sherwood Strauss, but a lot of those moves are made. Like I don't know how much you want to get in the weeds with this, but they're cutting people like Jason Stark and Edward who would have a very like easy transition, let's say, to NFL Network, MLB Network. I mean, I made the argument, Sports Illustrated, I don't think they got the money, but or are in a good place right now. But, Jason Stark would be a great fit at Sports Illustrated too. But, and again, I don't know how much people want to know about this, but you look at kind of Jim Miller and John Oren, those guys, they're reporting, Richard Deitch, they're reporting basically these guys are making money. ESPN's actually paying them not to work, assuming that they want to work. They're going to go somewhere else, and that'll avoid their ESPN contract. So, the hard thing is like a Sherwood Strauss here. I think that's good work. He was actually at Bleacher Report when I was there briefly. I don't know him, but I know, I talked to Rob Mahoney a while back when he was doing stuff on Talents and was in town, that's another guy who was at Bleacher Report who ended up at SI. And he spoke really highly of him. John Krasinski really likes him. So, those are the harder ones to see. But being young is not a bad thing because, A, you're not commanding the money, obviously, that the big guys are who, have a name and a rep and a big following and all that. Yeah. But B, we've seen success stories with our own guys. Sam has gotten more and more work in the high school scene doing play-by-play. He really, really likes doing that. And on the podcast side, Andy Carlson started out, he jokes about it. I think it was 2014. He started the end of the season, like in week 13 or something. I don't know, something like that. And he's, gotten the point where with his shows, especially with the Machine, that's got a large audience. I mean, we open up the phones, and I always feel bad when I'm there. My role is basically as producer and doing the phones. And I've talked to Zach Bennett, who also does producing, kind of the main guy. We can't keep
when he's not falling
keep
asleep.
Up with everyone. Right. Zach Bennett is one of a kind. Literally, you cannot find a more talented person, but goodness. And I'm not saying anything that I haven't said to him personally, but he just sometimes I'm like, Zach, stay awake, write stuff, keep doing your thing. Cause he's really good on the radio. His writing's good when he writes, and he should be doing length stuff. So he, as much as he's a Minneapolis guy, he's going to have to cross the river and go into St. Paul, which, I told him I'd pray for his soul, but, I've lived on both sides, just to be clear with everyone. And it is funny how much I feel like I'm talking about, Oklahoma City or something, somewhere really far away when I talk about St. Paul with him. But yeah, he's a goofball. And it makes the show what it is. They do a good balance of, they know what they're talking about. I really like that group just with, Andy has that humor, and Luke's a video guy, really, really knows video and just full of person. He's like that. I'll just hang out with him sometimes after, obviously off the air, and he's the same guy. And, and Arif's just like a machine. We joke that, I don't think he sleeps. I'm convinced he sleeps maybe 2 hours a night, and he is so full of information, very analytical, and at the same time has that kind of weird humor that he has that really works. So it's probably why that show is really popular. And, I don't know. It's fun. It's always fun. I hang out with those guys afterwards, go to Blue Door. We usually see a couple fans there, and they crack me up, man. They're really a unique bunch.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. When I've called in before, it's always fun to talk to them and get their opinions and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully someday I'm going to be able to talk to those guys in person. Hopefully I might end up going to training camp at some point this summer, and I'm hoping to at least meet Luke and Arif, maybe Andy as well. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Andy's actually Andy's from Rochester, I think. So Andy actually likes getting down there, and he went to school there. He went to Minnesota State Mankato, or whatever the hell they call it now. But
yeah,
I think that's where he went, or maybe it was Winona.
I think he went to Winona. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's right. But it was down that way. As I'm sounding completely like a jerk from Minneapolis, just clumps like everything else in the same category. But God, I'm probably going to get like a text from Andy after this. But yeah, no, Andy definitely gets down there, and it's fun. I mean, the Vikings do a good job of, it's like spring training. It's the one time I haven't been down to spring training yet, other than as like a fanner, and I actually haven't been to Fort Myers. I've seen the team play in Lakeland, which is Detroit's stadium, and Port Charlotte, which is the Rays. But that time of year is great for reporters and just media people because, the Vikings open the door. That's full of hope. That, the games themselves don't really matter, especially with baseball. I know you had Rhett on, your show, and, Rhett's told me that it's just fun. You get to know everyone, and it's so funny now, and it's always been this way. When I first covered the Twins, I was still in college, so I'd come in the middle of the season, which is super weird. The first time I literally didn't know anyone. And I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of, I was like, I'm going to have to figure out a way to produce content and stuff without really even knowing what access was or whatever. And their PR department was good to me about how, figuring that out. But, even today, I was talking to Justin Haley, which is the Rule 5 guy, and he's from Sacramento. Yeah, Rule 5 guy from the Twins, pitcher. Probably best known, unfortunately, and it was totally unintentional for drilling a guy in Detroit in the mouth. But I was talking to him, and I was at a wedding in Sacramento about a year ago, and it is funny where when I came up, and it was after a game to be fair, but when I went up to him and introduced myself, he was kind of like, "Really, we're doing this now?" And he was really fun. He thought I was goofy, I'm sure, like most of these people probably do. Most people, I think, in general do correctly think I'm kind of a goofy, but it's spring training is great because you can kind of get to know everyone, and it's a low key setting, and it's, I've always said it's reporting is actually done before the game, especially with baseball. You get there so early. You get there. Molitor goes about 4:10. I think the clubhouse opens up at 3:30 for a 7 o'clock game. So, that's when you do the reporting because once you're you have the emotions after the game. I mean, some guys can kind of just handle it level-headed, but either they're way too hyped up and it can make for a fun video or kind of a, goofy quote. But, you don't know if they're really saying that just because they're excited or because that's what they mean. And if they're, if they lose in baseball, it's a little different. Wins and losses in baseball don't matter as much just because there's so many games. But, they're crushed. They're not, it's understandable. You're not going to have a really great conversation. And, there's outliers to everything, but, it's one of those funny things to learn about it. But when I first went up to him, I think he thought I was going to ask him questions, and he was like, "Dude, I didn't even play. Why are you talking to me?" But that is what it is. Yeah,
it's funny how I kind of got into listening and getting involved with podcasts. I just randomly, I think, heard about Andy's show, Purple for the Win, and I was just kind of wanting to get some more talk about. I think I started out listening to Paul Allen's show, and I kind of got sick and tired of all the wild stuff because I do not care about hockey, and there was other things that they were saying that I don't care about. It's okay, just stick to Vikings or Twins or something, but no. So I decided to get into podcasts where usually if you get the right podcast, they'll stick to that subject, and I really got to Purple for the Win, and that is really what got me into podcasting. And that was really what opened me up to Cold Omaha and all the podcasts that you guys have. And I've been listening to the Andy Luke and Reeve Football Machine ever since that started, and it's been a lot of fun to see your guys' progress and the love of podcasts that I've found that Andy has kind of spread to me, so to speak, a little bit. So that's when I started.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. We talk about that. Our goal of the podcast is instead of having, appealing broadly, which K-Fan does a good job, but the issue just generally with radio is that you have to kind of have a hot take or just kind of a general opinion because you can't get in the weeds the way we do in a podcast. And we got, we're careful too. You can't, when I'm talking to Brandon, we can't spend too much time on, even a Steven Gonzalez, who I think is a really good prospect and we may see here in Minnesota soon. And he was a super nice guy. He was actually at a Twins Daily event I was at recently. But, I think, we know that we can't spend too much time in the minor leagues. We may say, hey, look, Nick Gordon's hitting well. That looks like a good draft pick. Cole Stewart's struggling. That's a guy in high school who, looked like a superstar and really is kind of spinning his wheels in Double-A. And we'll get into the things like should Park have started the year with the team or, why Vargas didn't, for example, and he's really, really doing well. But, at the end of the day, people want it, touch the third rail with, as I call it, with Bauer, and they want to talk about Dozier, who I think has been struggling a little bit. Buxton not swinging, and then the positives of Sano looks like that superstar, and Urban Santana looks ageless, and when you look at Buxton in the field, he looks really, really good. So,
yeah.
we make sure, we touch on the big topics and things like you'd hear on the radio, without hopefully getting into screaming matches and ridiculousness. And then, with the podcast side, it's just nice. You can bring in a guest. We had like Pat Borsi on a while ago, and he's, it's interesting because he's actually New York, or came from a New York media background. Was that in Florida, where like some of these Dan Van Natta and Michael Russo started in Florida, Mike Bernino started in Florida.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There's this lady from Deadspin who does all the investigative reporting. She started there too. I'm blanking on her name, but it's funny. Just a guy with that much background. You can pick his brain for hours on baseball and get just a unique perspective, and then turn around and in the off season he got people from all around the leagues, all different, NL, AL.
Right.
We've had my friend on who Chris may have been at a party before he came on, which we were kind of like, we probably should do this before parties than after. But just try to get a wide variety of perspectives, but also have a more meaningful conversation than just picking apart a superstar. Because at the end of the day, I think these star players, A, are human and will at some point not be as good as they used to be, and B, at the height of their powers, probably are better than everyone's kind of representing it, and get into the kind of the nitty gritty of what do you do with Kyle Gibson, who just got sent down, or Brandon had a really good interview with Phil Hughes. Just how do you at age 30, when you're not throwing as hard as you used to, pitch in the major leagues, because the bats are still good, and stuff like that. And like I said, I've talked about the machine with how we, those guys kind of all take a segment with it, not only just football, not only just Vikings, but film, analytics. Sam, I see as kind of the five-tool guy, right? The utility guy who can do anything. Even Andy bringing humor to it. And there's an art to that, because we have to be serious about some things, like concussions are a big deal, or even a player getting cut. It's just like that's going to affect how, it's going to move their family around. Stuff that, you see on Hard Knocks and stuff, we try to bring in perspective, because we see it, obviously the Vikings, I think most teams don't want the cameras around like they have with Hard Knocks, but the guys who are in the locker room, they're experiencing that in real time. And so, all that stuff,
Yep.
I don't even remember what the original premise here was, but, with podcasts, you can get into that stuff. And like I said, I really like radio. I like the immediacy of it. You can get news out right away. You can speak to fans, this and that. But, and this is one of the things you just have to build up, or we're trying to get people to build up the habit of listening to podcasts, whether it's just one of them, a few of them. And exactly, I'm actually kind of one of those weird people that likes hockey and basketball, but I understand our basketball guys don't really have much to do with hockey, and our hockey guys don't really have much to do with Actually, the funny thing is, I think Giles is actually a pretty big basketball fan, but those guys know a lot more about hockey, and I think that's fair. Even for us, we're trying to go a little bit broader. This is one thing, not that I want to compliment Bleacher Report too much, but this is one thing they did well. They realized, look, the guy who basically ran it, Dave Finocchio, went to Notre Dame. So when he was in Indiana, he was a displaced, Giants fan, or so San Francisco Giants, or a displaced Warriors fan or whatever, and Niners. And I think it's a good point. Like, sometimes the people who have left, whether it's for work or whatever, we get callers on the Vikings show from like Florida, and we had an Omaha guy, which is cool. And we'll get, people from all over, and in addition to specific places in Minnesota. And so that's the thing too, is we try to get away from just kind of this is something that someone who's not from here doesn't care, and then still have kind of the hometown charm. And that's a balance we try to strike all the time. But I do think it's important to think about, especially in today's world where, I look at it like Ben, one of the guys who does the Wild show. He travels for work, right? He has a great perspective on being a Wild fan who may end up in LA one week and may end up in, New York or whatever the next. Yeah. So Seattle, something like that. So, we try to keep that all in mind. And I think podcasts are nice just because, A, you can't really get the frequencies. B, you may not want to turn on your computer and listen to radio with all the commercials and stuff. And C, you may just, I had friends somehow became a Twins fan, even though they were living in California, right? And you're like, well, I don't know how that happened, but you're probably not going to want to listen to K-Fan that has all the other, Minnesota sports or, whatever, all that stuff. yeah, I mean, I'm obviously a big fan of podcasts.
Yeah, it's not that I don't like radio, and I definitely love PA and everything that he does. He's a fantastic play-by-play guy for the Vikings, but it's just like I said, it's just the fact that when you want to listen to something, you usually specifically want to listen to one thing or two things, and then they're going to cover like 5 things. So, I mean, it's pretty hard to catch it at the right time if you're just picking it up at like 9:30 in the morning when they started at 9. It's like, okay, what part of the show are they at, you know? But when you go to podcasts, when you go to podcasts, though, you can pick the time that you want to listen. You can do it on your commute and be on your way. It's really nice how that works with podcasts, I think, over radio, especially since I don't get KFan on my radio 4 hours south of Minneapolis. I'd have to listen to it on iHeart or radio or whatever, which is fine. But again, it's nice to be able to pick what you listen to, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think, there's issues with the internet and how it's been a disruptive force in journalism. And listen, I know it as well as anyone. I mean, when I was a junior in college, so applying to jobs, the Star Tribune was bankrupt. You know what I mean? And the Pioneer Press is kind of hanging in there. They do really, really good work. But, there's just the internet's been disruptive, but at the same time, it's given the opportunity to a lot of other people. And I think, including myself, I think there's a lot of people who may have been shut out. For whatever reason. And, it's one of those things. It's not always going to be the most talented. And unfortunately, there are people that are just loud and get attention because of that. But what I've noticed, and this is just me, to me, sports should be a calming presence. Like, it's something that's there every day. It's supposed to be, to me, it's get away from the things that drive me nuts, right? For a little moment there, I can just say, hey, when I'm at a baseball game, hey, this is all I'm focusing on right now. And I think podcasts, by and large, and I'm making a very broad, I'm kind of painting with a broad brush here, but they're a little more either kind of jokey, like kind of the Bill Simmons, I was listening to, he had the South Park guys on. Obviously, he's just sitting there cracking jokes, but there's also there's something kind of rhythmic about a lot of the other stuff where it's just, when I listen to Brandon or Sam, it's kind of just like, it'll calm you down because they're just not kind of wild people, which is really good.
Right.
I mean, that's what you want. And yeah, I mean, I think it's cool that, I look at Andy and, you can just flip it on and get going. And I mean, the truth of the matter is eventually you're going to have to differentiate yourself and get the, to be on mid-roll, for example, I think, which is like what Simmons uses for his ads. You probably have to be at 25, 30,000 downloads. It's going to take a while to get there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I kind of look at some of our other ones and, some guys will be like, oh, we only got a couple hundred. And I was like, let's put this in perspective. These are probably your most loyal listeners who probably listen to the whole thing. And, there's probably at least a point in my life when I was like, maybe this is true right now, where I'm like, why would 100 people want to listen to me, right? It's cool. I mean, and the thing is, advertisers acknowledge they have to be there, and it's not exclusive. I've noticed just especially locally that people are going both ways, and they're both on the radio and on podcasts, and it's cool just to be acknowledged that, like, look, this is. If you have someone endorsing your product on a podcast, it's probably, if it's Michael Russo or whatever, it probably is someone who likes Michael. That's a bad example because you're not a hockey guy, but, John Krasinski or whatever, if he says something, but you're probably a pretty big Wolves fan and, you're going to take him seriously. And, on top of him being really, really good at his job and honestly, nicest guy ever, when Sam Mitchell snapped at me, this would be 2 years ago, Sam Mitchell, who was very salty and, thrown into a very bad spot, but did not really like me very much. Nor did he like really most of the other media or I think other people. But he, John was when he snapped at me at a press conference when I was asking about like Tyus Jones, like a very normal question. He came up and patted me on the back and said, "Hey, it's a fair question. Don't take it wrong." So in addition to being a cool guy, I mean, he's from here. He's from Blaine, I believe. Went to Blaine High School and University of St. Thomas, so if he's out there, telling you, hey, I use this product or it's being advertised against him even, it's like, well, it's probably going to have some resonance with some sort of listener there. So, yeah, it's cool. Like I said, I think this stuff works itself out at the end of the day. News is better on the internet. Like, it just is. Like, if it's printed, you're not going to get it in time, or whatever, in a timely fashion. And at the same time, it's not a bad, I still read print magazines. I don't get the paper, and I know a lot of people actually just get the Sunday paper now, but I still read the newspaper. I'm just reading that on the iPad, and I'm getting that news much more immediately. And it's good to see, I think there is still a commitment there. And I understand with the ESPN layoffs, people are like, oh, they're going away. It's all hot take people and going away from reporting. And, I'm like, at the end of the day, A, they probably didn't do the reporting great. B, here locally, the Vikings guy is still here, and he does a really good job, right? Yeah. And you still have Lowe, and you still have Barnwell, and you still have, Wright Thompson, right? You got guys who are still really, really good there. So, in the way I look at Grantland, I don't think it was a financial thing. I think they got pissed at Simmons. And if you're Bill Simmons, you laugh. You go, hey, everyone's getting laid off, and I've got my own profitable company right now, right? I can write what I want, do what I want. Yeah. And I think Grantland's just shut down because he was the guy that they built it around. I mean, it's probably not incredibly different. I know Sports on Earth still is around, but it's not kind of what it was when Joe Posnanski started it, right? And when he leaves, probably lost a little bit of momentum there too. So, but yeah, I just look at it and, I tell people just find, I actually like it when people will read my Deadspin story and they'll be like, oh, thinking about doing Bleach Report, and I'll occasionally get an email or whatever. And I'll just say, look, just figure out what you do really well. For me, I'm like a Minnesota sports guy, a generalist, but specific to a region. We just mentioned Luke and Arif, right? They chose kind of a segment there. Brandon's very much sabermetrics, but also has learned how to do reporting really well. So he can look at the metrics and look at the advanced stats and then go to a player and turn it into English, because look, I'm not going to understand it, and a lot of other people won't too. So, that's what I said. So if it's radio, like, I look at a guy like Andy, that's his strength. I actually like Zach's writing, but, again, on radio, he's really good. I think, you just got to find that strength of yours, and over time, media companies will come find you, because, it's what we did with, zone coverage, Cold Omaha. It's, I sat there and it became obvious over time. I said, Zach is really good with, basketball. Brandon's really good at baseball. We got to get Andy and those guys on board. Obviously, Arif was a big target of ours. Luke, I just met incidentally doing a fantasy football podcast, which is funny. But, again, like, I was like, yeah, we got to build around this guy. Like, people are going to love Luke. And like I said, it's no different. Really, it's not that different off the radio than on it. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I tell people. And I don't think that's going away. And look, these people that got laid off, it sucks. I mean, I know people have gone through it. I'm not going to say I got laid off, but I went through a really weird media experience with Bleach Report, and I've written for many sites that don't exist anymore, right? And I said, yeah, that sucks when you kind of see those things tank or good ideas fall by the wayside. But a lot of these guys are going to end up doing well. And the funny thing is, too, I think ESPN's bringing in the vertical. So you're going to have Wojnarowski. It's probably why Mark Stein's gone. And it may be why Strauss is gone, too. Like, he may just say, these are my guys. I want Mannix, and I want, so you go down the list of the guys there. And as much as people are going to roll their eyes and go, oh, okay, ESPN, I think that's a success, too. I really like those niche sites, the Monday morning quarterbacks, the verticals, you name them. I really like those kind of niche groups. You can look locally, the Wolf Among Wolves and Twins Daily, right? I really like those groups because you can kind of move them around, and it's going to be the same people and the same audience and stuff. And it's a good way. I mean, it's a really good way for especially young people that we had a site called the Fan Manifesto, and we're not together anymore, obviously, but we had some success. It was just guys on Bleach Report who all kind of wanted to write something a little different than what Bleach Report wanted. And it was a cool thing, like coming up, I could kind of experiment with my writing, and especially long form. And it's really funny that actually, probably because I was part of that site, I was able to write an 8,000 word piece for Deadspin. So maybe that's not a good thing. Someone probably read through that story and was like, goodness, cut a couple words here and there. But yeah, I mean, I like those deals, and it's unfortunate. There are people that should be employed or whatever that aren't right now. But on the flip side, a lot of people are actually really thriving too.
Yeah. Yeah, I've kind of experienced this myself when you talked about the digital, the media age where it's becoming more internet-based, and I've experienced that myself. I just started in January writing for the website's called Armchair All-Americans. I don't know if you've seen any of my articles or not, but I've been writing for the Vikings, and I've been writing a lot of different breakdowns of different players and that kind of thing, and just broke down the draft, not in depth, but about 1,000 words, which again, at least for me, I know I would get distracted or probably not read more than 1,000 words, just because I am one of those people. I'm a millennial, Tom, so I'm kind of one of those people that get distracted easily.
No, and to be fair, I write at about. We actually figured this out. You want to write between 1,000 and 2,000. I sit in about the 1,000 range. So the manifesto stuff was an outlier. I think I wrote once a week, and I would just dive into one topic really, really far. And sometimes, and I would just be honest with the guy's named Jesse, and I think he has contributed to ESPN, and I think he's still in the media business, although I think he does some other stuff too. But I told him, I said, hey, if you don't want this is fine, but I'm going to use this. I'm going to use the Bleach Report as kind of to learn my audience and hone my voice and react kind of to. I always joke that I'd have one or two editors at Bleach Report and 1,000 on the internet, but or more. But I used Manifesto, which was a lower reader count, and less. Not that Bleach Report had a ton of editorial oversight, but like even less than that. Right. But on the flip side, I just said, this is something I need to do for myself, because that. There's just all sorts of different writing out there, but my preference is magazine writing. I still read Sports Illustrated. I like The Ringer. Anything that, even when I get away from sports, that's just my preference. But even as someone who likes kind of a deep dive every once in a while, we only have so much time in the day, right? And and the nice thing about podcasts is I'm sure a lot of you people. A lot of my friends will be like, "Yeah, I just listen to your podcast at work." When I'm doing something kind of mindless or whatever. And that is the one nice thing. It's hard. Just look, if you really just have one strength, you should play to it, I think. But if you can do multiple things, it's so much better. Just because there's people that just do YouTube and just watch videos, right? And there's people that just do podcasts or primarily podcasts. And then there's people that just want to get away from that and just, when they're consuming sports content, want to do writing. Yeah. We're going to add that third dimension, the video stuff. And actually, Luke's already done some for our site, but we're going to hit that harder once we kind of, we have a lot of balls in the air right now. But, we made sure at least we had two dimensions there, that we had the written text. And then we also, had a podcast. And I do think it creates some clarity, especially if you're a reporter, some of the things that don't show up in your story because you've got to, hit a certain word count. Yeah. It's nice to throw on the podcast. Or there's things that are just not. I'm not saying that are off the record or inappropriate, but there's things that like you wouldn't put in the report, but are fun anecdotes to talk about. And for an opinionist, it's nice to. Now most of our people are kind of both, but it's nice to have that clarity where you may write something and maybe now again you should try to write and be as clear as you can. But it's nice to get that nuance. And we really encourage put the opinion on the podcast and focus on that a little bit more. And when you write, for me, when I write, it's something a lot more complicated. That when I wrote about the Twins, and I wrote, and I truly believe this, they have enough talent to be a winning team. I will present that opinion on a podcast, but I'm not going to dig in deep about how they're deep enough that a Gibson and a Mejia can, not really pan out, and maybe Mejia resurfaces at some point, or if not, Barrios might take over a role there. And I kind of explain this, how they're deep in, and eventually these relievers that we talk about, like Nick Birdie and Tyler J, like these guys are going to have to perform at some point, right? And that should fill out the bullpen a little bit. And just talk about kind of Park's role and where he would fit in, or a handful of these guys in the minor leagues, or when we could see a Nick Gordon, who, maybe in the future. I understand that Brian Dozier is the face of the franchise. I actually wrote a lot about him before he really got big, just because the most fun time to write about players really is early on, because, with the exception of the guys like a Mauer that just get oversaturated. Everyone knows they're good, and they're going to try to get him at 18 to do a big profile. A guy like Brian Dozier was drafted late. There wasn't many people talking to him early on when he was a shortstop and struggling at that position. I like him a lot, but there may become a day where Polanco's the second baseman and Nick Gordon's, at short, right?
Yeah.
And kind of thinking through all those mechanics going on. And, that stuff's great for an article when Brandon really digs into the weeds with the stats. That's great for an article when, Reeve, same thing with stats, Luke with some of the film. And then, the podcast is just nice to kind of generally go over it and go, hey, look, if you have an interest in this, go on the site. So, again, I probably talked too much about the mechanics of media, but in that little segment there. But that's why you need people who are strong hosts, and at the same time, you need strong reporters, and you need good opinionists and stuff like that. But I always tell people, look, play to your strengths, but maybe try a different sport every once in a while, or maybe I look at if I had just been a hockey guy, and it literally I kind of did it because the San Jose Sharks played really close to where I went to college, and B, I had this weird USHL niche that I knew. But I was like, if I stayed a hockey guy, I may get lost in today's media, and it's sad, but that's who it's being cut. We know that Russo is obviously a big deal here, but there's just not a ton of hockey media. And really, the NHL is not really great to new media. The Wild specifically aren't either. They're not a big fan of us. So, for me to kind of switch, over to basketball, which I played a little bit in high school and stuff and still play pickup to this day, that's been great because the Wolves, even though they're not that great, are a rising brand. They have, two, arguably three, maybe even say four, depends on what you think of Rubio and Levine, but at least two star players that are well known in the league. They have a really unique coach who is very accomplished. Also just a really interesting person. He's not, and I always tell people this, when you talk to him on or off the record, like at practice or before games, he is like a normal human being, or as normal as Tom Thibodeau can be. When you see the crazy man, it's him coaching. He's like a football coach kind of on the basketball court. We kind of joked. I think eventually the league probably was like, you have to have a chair for him, and he has to sit at some point in the game. But then he goes in the huddle, and we watch, again, people can't really see this because I know that now they have like the audio or whatever, the Wired or whatever on ESPN, but generally people don't see the huddles. But when he's in the huddle, he's X's and O's. He compartmentalizes very well. So you have this interesting coach. You have, Carlton Towns, who's using his spare time now to promote Kit Kat bars or something. Wiggins, who I actually really like. Like he's very quiet, very different person than a lot of his teammates, but has kind of that quiet confidence and just kind of is. All these guys are freak athletes, but some of the things he does, I will turn to the guy next to me. It's usually Derek James from ESPN or Billy Bull or someone. And I'll be like, I don't know how he did that. I can't conceptualize this as someone who is very stuck to the ground and does not jump very high. I can't conceptualize this, and it's crazy to see in person, let alone, on TV and replayed in slow-mo, or whatever. But, I think it's just, that probably was a good move there. And it's fun to be covering baseball right now where there's some optimism around the Twins and that maybe these guys, the ESPN called them, or not ESPN, SI called them the Glimmer Twins, the Buxton Snow. Maybe they truly are going to pan up at this point. You think Buxton bought himself some time in the majors with his defense and maybe just seeing more at bats. Maybe he can be the guy he was in September and start, hitting homers and getting on base and using that speed of his. And with Sano, he's looking like a monster. So, it's been fun to cover him.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to watch the Twins so far this year. I was going to mention one thing, like we were talking about with the media, that job that I took with Armchair All-Americans, that actually was part of my application to take a job at the paper here in Rock Rapids. So I got to share my writing that I did there, and the paper was interested, and that is what got me the job there. And I'll be covering my actual team that I went to high school, where I went to high school during the summer, and I'll also be doing some announcing for them on the high school cube is what it's called, that they put games on there. And I love baseball. Personally, baseball is probably my favorite sport. Football is a very close second. And then basketball is probably a distant third, even though I'm starting to like it more and more. But it's been a lot of fun to see how my little endeavor that I took on writing for this kind of amateur college college student-based site kind of got me to the job that I have now.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, and I really think it's a disappointment. I hope it's turned around, but, I applied to all those small-town papers. My closest was I got an interview in Owatonna, but never actually got the job. But, it's unfortunate that route seems to be disrupted. I hope it's not completely gone, and I do know that there's some guys in the media who, started in Faribault or whatever, but and certainly the older guys did that way. But as much as I think, approaching it from many different angles isn't a bad thing. I mean, it's just like sports. People come from all different walks of life and take, one of my favorite stories are these guys like Chris Colabello, who was in like the Indy League, and I think the league's still around, but his team isn't, for 7 years, and ends up being a 29-year-old rookie who was mashing for a while. And, I still think those small town papers and stuff, I mean, it's, for someone, especially if you come from a really big city, it can be a really big lifestyle change. But, I do think that's a good place to learn fundamental journalism. And, even with zone coverage, one of the things we talk about in our meetings is, we do have to hit high school. We've done some stuff with high school hockey. I actually think Giles and Heather did a really good job covering that this year. We need to do more at the basketball scene, certainly with the football scene and whatnot. But that's it's just a good place to start. I mean, just you really do need to learn those fundamental things, and that's the problem. Is like my path has been so disruptive because it's it's almost kind of like it's a weird comparison, but kind of like with Aaron Hicks or some of these guys that they bring up too early. I mean, at times I was like, yeah, I'm really happy to be in the Twins press box, but like all of a sudden I look around and even people in my peer group, people my age, and especially a guy like Lavelle or whatever who's been there forever. I go, man, they're like, they're just miles ahead of where I am. And you pick it up. I mean, at the end of the day, like, some people aren't going to get those jobs and some people are, but I mean, I still think it's good to learn fundamentals there. And it's just, Kent Youngblood to this day still keeps score or whatever, keeps track of the game as though he's not being handed stats, from the PR team or whatever. And that's just fundamental journalism. That's probably why he's, still has his job and is still very relevant. Right. Yeah. It's funny to see that, right? I mean, Kent's been doing this a long time, and he's actually a second generation, if I remember right, writer. And, some of those things, I mean, even just from covering college baseball at Santa Clara, I mean, beyond the fact that for 1 year, J.R. Graham, who I covered and knew as like personally in college, was on the Twins, which is ridiculous. Yeah. But, covering that, when I go from Santa Clara to Twins, I mean, there were more similarities than you'd think, right? And, just learning the versatility I had in college where I covered everything. I covered like club baseball, and rugby actually was one of my favorites. A club team was really fun. Just learning that versatility is great because, as much as you probably don't want to chase the hot team, if you're really not a good football writer, don't just go to it because it's this massive sport, right? But like I said, it's kind of the hockey basketball thing for me. Like I didn't, I thought hockey would always be my focus. I kind of switch over and I go, hey, this is a good deal. Like the Wolves have a great PR department. The players are really, really good people. I really have not run into anyone I really don't like. It's like, I mean, it's just crazy to me how much of a following they have. Like, this team has been terrible. Like, half the teams in the NBA, more than half, make the playoffs, and this team hasn't made it for 13 years. Yeah. You know what I mean? They still have a very amazing – that when KG came back, like, I was at that game, and they put me way up in the hockey box because obviously there was a ton of media there. And I was just like, man, there's a lot of energy around, this team that really has not been good. And I think it's coming back around with, Rubio's improved play, certainly with Towns looking like probably a Hall of Famer. Wiggins, who looks like a special player. I mean, I understand the faults of all these guys, but Levine, when he was healthy, just, again, doing things that blow my mind, just from a human perspective, athletics perspective. And, it's nice to have that flexibility where you may say, and most people probably will stay on the track that they start out on because there's a reason for that. But it's nice to have that versatility. Brandon Warren, knows a ton about football. We had this staff pod that we do that we will do every week, I promise. We've been really bad about doing that.
Come on, Tom. I've been trying to get that podcast, man.
Right. No, we're trying to actually do a staff pod every week. But Arif left because he had to take a call, came back in the room, and he's nodding to what Brandon's saying. I'm like, that's as much affirmation as you're going to get. And Brandon would if you ask them like, oh, you're really a football guy, you'd be like, no, what are you talking about? I only know baseball. But yeah, the versatility helps, and it probably helps Sam that he can cover a whole bunch of different sports, and he can call just about anything. That helps out. It's even if something it's just in your back pocket where you may never really use it much, but just in case. Like I said, I'm not that I covered basketball really, really bad. Like the only thing worse maybe than Wolves basketball was Santa Clara basketball when I was there. But like it was the experience there that I got from it. Again, probably carried over to the Wolves more than I expected. So, but yeah, it's just I really do hope there's kind of a bounce back. Now that it's kind of shaken out where unfortunately usually one paper in each town is really struggling and one is pretty, has its feet firmly planted. I know for sure that's true here. But I'm curious how it kind of shakes out, and with those smaller papers. And really from our angle, it's behind the scenes. And again, it's kind of like the Cold Omaha zone coverage thing. It's a little hard to explain because it's not front facing. It's not someone who goes to our site won't see it. But in our meetings, we're saying, how do we take on this animal of, high school and even college, the St. Thomas, St. John, even Mankato, and you look at St. Cloud. My friend went there for a year, longer than 4 years, I've been to the hockey games out there, Duluth hockey, stuff like that. How do we cover these big events? I think that stuff's important too, beyond just covering a big prospect from Minnesota. Also, just why people care, or what what's happening there, and trying to get, again, it goes back to the business side. How do we get as many eyeballs on their site as possible? And it helps if you really cover the sports they care about. I know people that care more about the high school hockey league than the Wild, right? And I look at that and I go, that's crazy. Like, look how much better the Wild players are. But high school hockey is fun. Like the tournament is fun. And, similar things with basketball where people really, really get into that. And certainly at the college level, people love March Madness. And I think the NBA playoffs have gotten better, but certainly there's more uncertainty. Whether that's a good, bad thing depends on who you ask. But with March Madness, and there is the NBA, playoffs. So, we're trying to find experts in each of those places. And eventually, like I said, give someone a reason to, go to our site, even if, you may not be the most passionate Twins fan.
Well, Tom, I don't know if you've been keeping track of the time, but we are just about at an hour already, and we didn't even get to dive into this list I had.
Do you want me to give you a few quick takes? I'm trying to remember what you were talking about. Man, it's so hard to do this without.
I know. Well, I tell you what, like I told you in the text before, said we could probably talk hours on just the sports part, and we talked an hour just about our lives and what we've experienced. So.
I'll tell you real quick, just because this is stuff I'm covering, and obviously go to our site for the Vikings coverage. They're doing a really, really good job with this. Brandon and I are doing baseball. We try to do kind of in-depth stuff from the locker room about an hour before the game. We don't post before noon games just because there's not enough time. But you can follow our stuff there, and we're covering that stuff really closely. Zach is going to be doing link stuff, or at least he tells me he is, and we're still going to keep track of what's going on with the Wolves. And so Wolves Wired will continue. Tim will continue to be part of that. Like I said, I was joking, when I watched, I watched I think it was Cowboys and Vikings, the Thursday night game at a Reef's place, and I watched it with a Reef and Luke, and it is like the most ridiculous experience you will ever have, because they literally pause the game after, when the commercials are going, with all this fancy DVR technology and stuff, and will tell you why, look, that linebacker was too deep. This guy missed a critical tackle. And there's certain things they won't see in real time. You'll have to see the all-22 or go back and watch film. And, I go talk to Luke, I'll be at his place, and his wife is like, he watched the same damn game 10 times this week. And I was like, yeah, that's what these guys do. But it's a fascinating experience. And I was just like, you guys view football on such a different level than I do. And like I said, I kind of tell our guys, I know a little bit about each sport. We're really, to me, that's media, right? I'm consuming Richard Deitch and these guys I was talking about, Jim Miller, John Oren. And that's kind of my specialty with the site. And again, didn't expect that coming, but that's just kind of how it is. But yeah, I'll still be, I'll write a little bit about the Wolves and diving pretty far into Twins. And, even if you're just kind of a baseball fan, even a casual one, we're going to try to find I haven't, the interview, it was a small media scrum we did with Glenn Perkins, even for someone who doesn't want the deep numbers and this and that, doesn't need every quote from Molitor. And Brandon always tells me, like, I over-transcribe, which I probably do. But, look, this is, at the end of the day, a guy from Stillwater who went to, play for the Gophers and went to the U of M. And he can be salty at times, actually, but generally a pretty good dude. And he's 34 and has a shoulder injury. Like, Glenn Perkins may never come back. And it's unfortunate because his best years basically were when the team really didn't need a closer, because they weren't very good. But yeah, we have just an interview there, and I kind of laid out, like, in his own words, this is what he's saying right now. And kind of is at peace with the process, and at the same time is very frustrated with, I want to get back out there. I truly believe, like, he just wants to play baseball again. And so, we're trying to touch on the human stuff. I don't know if there will ever be a story like Chris Colabello, but there's some cool story in there that we're trying to fish out. And even just in the little day-to-day reporting, we try to find a little funny anecdote. There are things we see and hear that either off the record or just kind of don't belong in journalism. But, in general, we like, as long as it's on the record and suitable for normal people, it'll be in our writing. So, we try to find some stuff, even Torrey Hunter I really, really like him on the air and kind of like try to find some ways to incorporate all that in. So we're trying to, we can't be everything to everyone, but, we're trying to realize like that, sports are different to different people and people are at different levels. And, at the end of the day, we're striving as best we can to deliver it, as accurately and have a little fun with it too. So, that's kind of zone coverage for you, I guess.
All right, and it is zonecouragemn.com, is that right?
No, it's zonecoverage.com, and you can actually still go to coldomaha.com. It goes to the same place.
Okay.
Zone Coverage MN is the Twitter.
Okay.
And, and then, you can follow us on Twitter. There's the Zone Coverage Facebook page. Definitely follow us, and we're not looking to bombard you with the content or anything. I mean, at the end of the day, we're very confident our stuff is good, and if it's on there, there's a reason for that. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Tom, again, you can follow Tom Schreier on Twitter at tschreier3. And, Tom, we'll have to get you on another episode just to talk about this list that I had made up. But it's been a lot of fun to talk to you a little bit about the sports media world and what you've seen and that kind of thing. So, again, I appreciate you coming on the show and giving the listeners a little bit extra something to listen to tonight.
Yeah, no, thanks again, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Tom. And that's Tom Schreier of Cold Omaha /Zone Coverage. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at tschreier3. And that is going to do it for this episode of The Schuby Show. We'll be back again with another episode next time. Until then, Skol.
Thanks for listening to The Schuby Show. We hope you mildly enjoyed yourself with more never-ending nonsense with yours truly. For more nonsense, go to the website, theschubyshow.webs.com. Get the show on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Until next time, Skol.